I haven't seen like craft. I've seen like sort of an amalgamation of the deductive whatever it is that spits out, but like really figuring out a way to draw craft out of that. I don't know that it can do that because, our jobs are sort of to bring out the human factor and whatever you're looking at or whatever you're using.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast. I'm Brad Hefta-Gaub, and my co-host is
Scott Porad.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Vince Dean. Vince and I go way back, and we're going to talk to Vince about design and what the latest is happening there. Vince, you want to give us a little intro? Maybe kind of tell us the story of how you got to this podcast.
Sure. Well, Brad and I, of course, have a lot of history. I think we started working together in '99. It's been a while.
Probably.
But I kicked off my designing career more than 2 decades plus ago, and been in and out of corporate since. Mostly though, I spent a lot of my career running a design shop here in Seattle, primarily catering to startups. Which beyond Real Networks, Brad and I worked on multiple startups together. And I've been into product design ever since. And my latest role was actually in connected TV related, where we were building apps for around news, sports, and entertainment. And I did that for 8 years, and I really loved it. The beauty of working with the connected TV stuff was it was a challenge all around across all platforms, and there are so many. And it was interesting, the dichotomy between, the web, the way the web was 20 years ago, and then, 20 years later, you're working on CTV apps, and it's very similar. The challenges are all the same. It's a pain in the ass to develop for them. As it was on the web many, many moons ago. But yeah. And now I'm freelancing again. So
very cool.
Quick, can I double click on the connected TV stuff for a second? What ways was it similar to the old time internet in terms of being difficult?
It really, when we started, it really felt like the Wild Wild West. It's 10 years ago when I got started, and now it's been very much like systematized and templatized. When you go to a CTV app, you sort of have an expectation of the way it should work. Same with web mostly. It's a little looser, but when we started, it wasn't like that at all. I mean, we went from having a navigation on the bottom to the left side to the top, and now everybody has navigation on the left and the top, and just all of the things that come with that, as well as just understanding how to work across Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and then there's Samsung. Each one of those, they're nuanced, so you have to have a special code base for them. You did many years ago. Now most of them are React, I believe, but yeah, it felt like the Wild West. So
yeah, I can imagine that. Kind of when you say the Wild West of the early web, I kind of picture back when it was, Mosaic and Internet Explorer or something like that, and it's like, yeah, it's HTML, but like not everybody renders HTML the same way. And so much has happened in the last, 25 years around standardizing on HTML, standardizing on JavaScript, standardizing on CSS. And I mean, I haven't done that much in the connected TV space, but I imagine it has, there's just not standards. There at least 10 years ago, there weren't the same standards. And so you kind of had to code everywhere and debug everywhere and rebuild everything specific to each platform.
Yeah, it's gotten much more standardized by today's standards. I mean, the last project I did was for PBS. It's actually for the local conglomerate here in town called Cascade PBS. And we essentially stood up a subscription system for 300 stations across the country to actually use the system we built, so that they could have dual licensing, not only for their local stuff, but also PBS content. And that launched, I don't know, 8 months ago. And they're slowly getting subscribers now. And so these little stations don't have the capabilities to stand up their own stuff. So that's been really interesting too. So
I'd like to come back to the navigation point for a second and get your take on something. You mentioned that, at the beginning of the web, how navigation was on websites was all over the place, and it's standardized a little to the top and the left. And we've got mobile apps now. We kind of standardized a little bit. You sort of have navigation sometimes at the bottom, and sometimes you got like what people call the hamburger menu with the three little lines. Something I've observed is that, I'm tech support. I'm friends and family tech support. And
Aren't we all?
Yeah, and in the family, I have some folks that are a little bit older. My parents are still around. I've got in-laws, etc. And believe it or not, I had some grandparents that lived into their 90s. I had four of them actually. Actually, I had two, and Lisa had two. And so I was even doing sort of tech support for folks who are really old. And every time I have to help them, especially on mobile apps, it's so obvious to me how inconsistent the designs are, because every app is just basically completely different. And I thought to myself, I mean, it's really, if you want to get an example of like how difficult using a software product is, watch somebody who is not a digital native, try to use it. And so I guess my question is, well, I have two questions really. Do you think it'd be better? I mean, I don't know. I have a hunch that it'd be better to standardize more of these things. It'd be better for the users. If look, on both Windows and Mac OS, the menus are at the top, and people know where to find them. I find my family still struggles with those things. Like, yep, that's going to be in the file menu, Mom. Like, because I don't know. What's your take on that, about how far we've come, but also how far we maybe have to go to make these things really usable?
yeah, I mean, I agree with you on standardization, but every once in a while, a disruptor comes along and changes how we do things. And that sort of muddies the waters. You know what I mean? Like, I recently finished up a course with James Hurst, who early on, he was like the creative director at Tinder. And he sort of came up, I believe he came up with the sort of swipe left, right kind of thing. And that disrupted a lot of the sort of the way we look at mobile and the way we navigate. So, it just continues to evolve. And, I mean, for the most part, even us native digital folks, we know how to use a mobile app. But yeah, there's, from company to company, people are going to have different solutions. And also the varying degrees of design that actually makes those decisions depend on, who's running the show. Oftentimes poor decisions are made, more often than not. So you get this, you get your 90-year-old grandma trying to navigate something, that's completely different from the other app she was using, and she doesn't know what she's doing, right? So
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Vince. One of the things that I have always valued about working with you, and I think this is, no, you're quite good at what you do, and there's plenty of people I've worked with in design that are good at what they do, and but there's also people that do it and are not good at it. And and I also feel like a lot of times it's one of these disciplines. So I'm going to say this from the spirit of like, as a CTO, really valuing and understanding what these experts bring to the table. An expert in user interface design, an expert in graphic design, especially the user interface portion of it, the user experience portion of it. It's so interesting to me that um, sometimes I feel like some product leaders or, you know, technical leaders or business leaders don't necessarily get it. And therefore they're like, well, I want it to look a
yeah,
certain way. Like they have a vision for how they want it to look, but they aren't thinking through the implications for usability.
or just like respect across the board. A designer should respect, what the engineers are doing, and the engineers should respect what the designers are doing, and it goes all the way to the top. There needs to be some sort of synergy there, that where you get good results. And when you work in an organization where people, you know, partly understand and respect each discipline, it works
And you're
really
getting better
well.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So a little bit of a hard pivot, but I'm kind of curious, Vince, to get. I mean, maybe the take on this is going to be interesting. Like, does uh, the world of LLMs and the sort of like churning of everything that's ever been built, every design that's ever been done, existing in this like space of reproducibility of generative AI. Um, what's your take on that? What are you seeing in the space of design? Um, and how is generative AI changing the way you think about design?
It's changed my sort of approach quite a bit. But but the principles around design are still the same. I mean, I've been really heavily experimenting with AI for the last couple of years, and now I use it daily in my workflow. But to create things, not so much. I love to have AI to lean on AI to sort of distill ideas. Um, it's such a great research tool, like to tap into sort of culture and like doing deep research on culture and what resonates with certain audiences and those types of things. But as far as like, and you can help those things to help you to distill ideas, but as far as like using it as a design tool, um, I have yet to see anything that has impressed me at all. Like there's so much hype about, you know, well, Figma's dead and designers are dying and blah blah blah. And like I don't see it, not yet. And I the same holds true with, engineering and development. Like, yeah, junior designers and junior developers may be in a tight spot right now. But like if you're well versed at design and craft especially, it's valued because AI just doesn't know how to do it. And right now, the best results you can get out of AI, as far as I've seen anyway, is like you can create a prototype pretty fast. Like, and if you have been doing this long enough and you can actually understand it enough that you can actually create a PRD, and you can use AI to help you create a PRD. You create that PRD and then plug it into something like Replit, and you can get astounding results pretty quick. And it'll even go out and like build out a database and connect to the APIs you need to say, like recently I tried just creating a quick demo of like, okay, how can I get all the latest movies and streaming streaming TV in one place. It went out and connected to the right API I needed. It asked me questions because I told it to ask me questions. Went out, connected to all those things, and then I got results, that I could search through. And that's like I couldn't do that 5 years ago. No way. I needed someone like you to help me out. Um, on the flip side of that, that is not production ready by any means.
Right. Do you see
Yeah.
that same? So what I hear you saying is it sounds very similar to what I have experienced in the side of sort of writing code, where it's like, um, I come to the table with a understanding of architecture, understanding of what I want, understanding of what the design needs to be, like the software needs to ultimately look like. And if I give it
Yeah.
very, very clear instructions about the same way I would have done it if I was going to write it, then it will produce something that is useful for me to then validate that it's usable. And it can quickly generate prototypes. So are you sort of seeing that same thing, not just in the space of like user interface design and usability, but where are you seeing that in like generating images? I think I saw you had a post recently on LinkedIn where you kind of talked about how you were using MCP protocol and AI to like do something like contrast checking a photo or something like that.
Yeah. I wanted to like, for a designer like me and many, many designers that I know, they have thousands of Figma files and thousands of things within a Figma file and layouts and icons and all of those things. And I simply I sort of bought into some of the hype around NCP, right? And I forget what the acronym is for exactly.
I guess Model Context Protocol.
That's it. So essentially it's a tool that will allow you to connect your applications, your local applications, to an LLM, and it goes out and does that through a repo like GitHub, and you can have it check things, right? That's the way I understand it. I'm a complete novice, by the way, and in that regard. So I dug into Gemini and had it. I asked it. I said, "Hey, I want to do this thing, and I want to figure out how to use an LLM to check it." And it sort of made suggestions, and I suggested an MCP, and I went to build it out, and I did build it out and got it sort of functioning. But when all is said and done, I spent multiple hours trying to set it up, and never really. It was all trivial results. Like there was nothing substantial that I saw that gave me added any value to my workflow.
And to clarify, Vince, because so you had this idea of a type of common action that you have to do as a designer,
Yeah,
validating that the Figma is designed correctly or that it
accessibility.
meets
That's a big thing,
accessibility.
right? Like, is the copy legible on this gray background? Let's have an LLM check that. There's no easy way to do that. So ultimately what I wanted was to have an LLM look at all my Figma files and uncover where accessibility was an issue. Point it out to me. And there's a way to do that, maybe, but I sure couldn't figure it out. I got them to talk to each other, but no, I spent so many hours trying to.
But I mean, it's interesting, right? Because what I hear in that story is the idea that as a designer, you have very real workflow things that you have to do
Yeah.
that are, like, I mean, I know the word accessibility, but I need an expert like you to say, hey, Brad, this design that we're doing for your new startup, we want to make sure it's accessible. And this is what that means, contrast, etc., whatever.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's part of your expertise that you bring to the conversation around design and usability. And it's not just the colors that are my favorite colors, right? It's like you have that expertise. And this is an example where you said to yourself, hey, all this hype is that these AI agents are going to somehow, do the work, do the busy work for us.
Yeah.
And so you gave it this task that you thought was a pretty straightforward task and marginal results.
Yeah, it failed. Like, and I will say maybe I did something wrong, but I did get them talking to one another. The cool thing that came out of that project is, and I use Gemini quite a bit. I use all of them, but Gemini is really good at being a partner at troubleshooting something. And it walked me through everything with sort of precision. And if it missed something, I would let it know, and it would figure out why, and then have me do something and retest it. It was amazing that in that regard. I tried it with Claude too, but Claude missed little things here and there. It missed all the fine details that you need if you're a novice. And I told it I was a novice. So that was sort of the interesting thing about going through that project was, how do I do this? And please help me do it. And it helped me do it, and I got it done. So yeah, but again, it was trivial results, and it was an experiment more than anything. I didn't care whether I got it to work or not. I just wanted to try it because I wanted to see what this MCP stuff was all about. And again, that's me, just like everybody else, getting sucked into this hype that's just ridiculously overblown. It's nauseating. So,
Can I go back to this accessibility question for a moment? Setting aside the AI part, if we wanted to have a robot of any type check to see if the designs met some accessibility standards, how would that actually work? Like, are there standards that could be codified? Like,
yeah, there is. there's actually a tool in Figma that will do that, but it only checks incrementally at the things you tell it to
Mhm.
check. But if you have thousands of files like me, say I have a build of some big project, like say it's a CTV
Mhm.
project, right? There are hundreds of layouts to go through. There's no easy way to do that. So I wanted to figure out I wanted to automate a way to do that.
Yeah, so like Figma doesn't have like a check all button.
If there is one, I haven't seen it.
Right. I don't know. I actually have a, can I detour for a second,
Yeah.
sidebar for a second and ask about Figma?
Mhm.
So look, I've worked in engineering and product management for my career. I've never really worked in design. In fact, when I'm introducing myself to a new team, I have this slide I give, which is like, hey, here's all the things I've done in my career. And then that's all on one side and the other side is, but not design. And the not design part is in Comic Sans, of course, just to be funny. But so I don't know a
That's
lot
why
about,
that's why you've never landed a job in design is because you always use Comic Sans.
that's it. Pardon me. So let's see. I have a question about Figma, and this is going to require maybe you giving us or me a little bit of education about the design tool landscape. Look, my only understanding is in the olden times there was Photoshop, and then all of a sudden it seems like Figma became the thing, and I don't really know why or how, or I just hear that, and I'm just be curious to know like. What is it about Figma or is it true that Figma is sort of a dominant player in this space now? And why? I don't really know what it is about Figma that's so great.
Yeah, the difference between like Figma, the core difference between Figma and Photoshop is Figma was made specifically for product. And
Hmm.
so they built all the tools inside of it around building for product. Photoshop
Hmm.
is for pictures,
Hmm.
illustrators for illustrations. Um, what's the other one? All of Adobe products, many of them, they're not built specifically for product, except
Hmm.
was it XD was built for product. And I think that's the Figma competitor. I think it's called XD. But the beauty of Figma is it allows you to rapidly build out layouts, and it has all the tools you need to actually build those things out. And they did it in a really beautiful way. And the fact that it's out on the cloud and it's you can share it out with a developer to actually uncover what the styles are, what the CSS is behind that, and all of those things. That's the beauty of Figma. That's the other thing about the hype that sort of makes me a little crazy is everybody's saying Figma's dead, and it's not. Like it simply is not. There's not. I guarantee you at Google they're not doing away with Figma for many many years. Like it's gonna be a while. Yeah, it may eventually fall by the wayside, but it's a really great product and it's specifically for product building.
Interesting. So whereas in industry, we were taking tools really designed for other purposes and trying to make them design online products. Figma, whoever owns Figma, came along and said, let's make a tool really designed for people who are designing online products, designers
Yeah, and
like
they did
yourself
it
and
really
software engineers.
well. So
And they
yeah,
did it well.
yeah.
Were there other competitors at the time when Figma was sort of emerging? Were there other competitors at the time and they were the winner, or was it just they were the only one that came to the table?
Yeah, there are a few. Like I said, I think it's XD is the other one. I probably
Hmm.
get it wrong. And I'm sure there are a few others, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Figma just came out of nowhere, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, wow, geez, this thing's pretty
Yeah.
amazing." Uh,
In some sense, it's like you said, Vince. It's like they were disruptors in that
yeah,
they to use Scott's language, like the way design worked is there were these tools that everybody used. Like I'm pretty sure Vince, you and I worked together and you designed websites for me using Illustrator
yeah,
probably, or
yeah,
Illustrator kind of would have been the closest thing to Figma. It's a little bit more object oriented, vector based instead of Photoshop. And you probably were stuck in that world of Illustrator, and then the Figma team basically are like, no, we're going to solve a very specific problem. This is going to be designed for essentially software products, whether those are websites or mobile apps or connected TV apps or whatever that might be.
Okay, so now I have a follow-up question. As an engineering leader, what can I do? What can I have my engineers do to work with you and the design team and Figma, et cetera, to get them to make it easiest and most effective for you?
Most effective for me is, that's a good question.
Let me ask a tangentially related question. Does Figma actually produce the style sheet, the CSS code?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
So in the old world where a designer would give an engineer an image and the engineer would try and figure out the CSS from that, in the Figma world, it generates that.
Yeah, and it's not perfect by any stretch, but the styles are there.
Interesting.
And if you design it and build it out perfect, you'll get really good results. But if you're sloppy about it, you won't. And the other beauty of Figma is like you can set up a whole design system. Like you have these things that you reuse throughout all of your layouts. A really good example is like the bottom nav on a mobile app. That's going to be used across multiple layouts, but it also will have on states, not hover states, on states, off states, those types of things across all these layouts. And each of those, and that little module, we'll call it I forget what's called in design systems terms, but like that will have variables in it that you can change, like turn this to on, turn that to off, change this icon to this. And that's another one of the beauties of Figma is you can build out these really comprehensive design systems.
So you're giving me a clue of something we can do, which is to the extent that as engineers, we keep whatever, I'm going to mangle all these words, but we keep the designs that are in our code as in sync as possible with the designs that you have as designers in Figma. And I would imagine maybe there's some way to even sync those up through a repo, a GitHub integration or something like that. If we keep those in sync, it's going to make that whole thing go more smoothly.
Yeah, and that's really, really hard. Yeah.
That's one of the things I think that when we chatted with Greg Conklin, that was one of his things. He said early on, like early on, get a design system. Make sure you're using a design system.
And the hard part about design systems is if you're, say, a startup, for instance, you don't build a design system until you're, a few years in. Like it's worthless up to build. Well, it actually shoehorns you or pigeonholes you into a space with a design system. If you start there, you have to stick with this thing because design systems can be kind of rigid. That's one of the setbacks of them. It's a really good design system will be flexible enough so we can do things with the design if we need to evolve it. But a lot of times they're very rigid and it's difficult to make change. So you need to be really loosey goosey with it up front and then build it out when you feel like you're really at a really good place with the design. So
you know what that sounds like, Scott?
No, what's that sound like?
That sounds like technical debt to me.
It's design debt. Sounds like design debt.
You run for 2 years because you're trying to stay fast and loose and appropriately, and then you're finally settled. The dust has settled at 2 years, and you're like, oh yeah, it turns out every single one of our hover states or every one of our on states, they were manually coded, and now we're going to try to retrofit that into a nice design system where we can just say on and off, and it's like gotta come back and you got a combination of that design debt and technical debt you have to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, you can be very conscious of that build process along the way. That take a pretty experienced team to do that and make sure we're all in sync across the board. It's a give and take. So
if I were starting a project today, whether mobile app, online, CT or whatever, are there like open source design systems I could just sort of download to start with?
Yeah, there are tons of them. Yeah.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Like Skeleton or Tailwind or right.
Yep. And you can take those and sort of modify them to suit your needs.
Yeah, but as you're saying, when you're getting started with your application, whatever it is, you need to iterate and modify that design, and you're kind of there's an interesting trade-off there. Do we want to be locked in or do we want to have flexibility?
Yep. And you get to a point where if you have a really good design system, an engineer can just take the modules and create a layout on their own. They don't need design even involved. yeah, maybe look at it, QA, that type of thing when you're ready to push it. But um,
Like the product owner can come say, "Oh, we now want a mute button here," and it's like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to go use the button from the button module, and um, I already had there was already a speaker icon that existed on the volume control. I'm gonna boom, just drop that in. Now we got a mute button."
Well, here's an interesting thing I'm putting together, which is if from the engineering side, if you're going to try to get the AI to write your software for you, having a design system is going to make it better because you can say, here's the design system you use, here's the modules I want to use, whatever they're called in a design system, and it's gonna make it easier for the AI to build you a good app versus if it's just every part of the design it's making up from scratch.
that's exactly right. And it's getting to the point where you can actually have a layout, and within that layout, there are design system ingredients. You can give a layout right now to various AI products that are actually made to build prototypes, and it will start with that. It has to be really dialed. You need to make sure everything's up to standard in terms of how you approach a layout, but it evolves every day. It continues to get better. They're lovable, and Bolt and Cursor and all those tools they're all built specifically for building out these prototypes and eventually product. Whichever one wins the race, who knows? But these things are advancing pretty quickly, and it's been really interesting and exciting to see where they're going. So
I sort of feel like this is another example, Scott, that you and I have talked about where like I've had the good fortune of working with folks like Vince who are willing to be patient enough with me to explain why a design system matters, and help me understand that as leading a development team, that if I can work within the constraints of this design system, or we can collaborate on a design system, that's going to all of a sudden make us more efficient in the long run. And so I already knew to ask the LLMs when I was saying, stand up a website for me. I already knew to say, I want you to use skeleton because I happen to have played around with that and I know about it, and I want you to, and so I knew to tell it that. Like I knew ahead of time that I was going to tell it to use that specific, component and design system and use it in that way. Um, and it's a little bit like you were saying, Scott, like, oh, like I don't know, I'm building a mobile app, but it did it. It built this thing, but I can't, I'm not enough of an expert in that particular set of architecture components that I can evaluate. Did it even do it right? You know? And so this to me feels very similar to the stories that we've heard from so many entrepreneurs that we've talked to about this, where it's like you kind of got to know what you're doing
yeah,
in order to tell it what you want it to do.
yeah. The meta part about it is like tell it to you can tell tell it to help know what I'm doing. So you know what I mean? So it's pretty insane. And the other thing that sort of plays into that I've seen, like the trend is like a lot of people are building these out with actually problem solving first. And that's so key. And that all comes with that, Brad. Like we got to know what this thing needs to do, and what platform it needs to be on, and what API it needs to talk to, and you know what design system it needs to leverage. So yeah, it's the problem solving up front that really helps you get the right prompt.
Well, I read something online, tweet length kind of thing, which a designer questioning, will AI really, you know, kill designers, so to speak? Not like murder, but the career. And the person said, no, you still have to get the clients to tell you what they want. And if they can't tell a human, they're not going to be able to tell the AI. And
Oh, that's interesting. Hold on a second. I think I hear what you're saying, Scott. Let me just make sure I'm getting this. This is similar to what we talk about with engineering, that it's that being that Rosetta Stone between like what the product owner says they think they know what they
mhm,
want and they're sort of using words to describe it, but you can't just go code that.
right,
And I'm Vince, you're nodding your head. So
Yeah.
how many times you feel like you're sitting there across the table from a product owner and they're using English words, but you're like, no, no, hold on a second. I really need to draw out of you what you really are asking for here.
Right. I mean, we have to help the client or the product owner, whoever it is, to distill their ideas into something that's tangible. And oftentimes it's wrong, and we have to figure out a way to tell them it's wrong.
Right.
So that's the other interesting thing about AI is you can tell it that, tell it to question my assumptions, you know,
Hmm.
question my assumptions. Am I making the right decision here? Am I, what if give me other solutions? That's the beauty of some of those things. So
Yeah, that is interesting. I have noticed that the LLMs tend to they default to quite agreeable, right? If you tell them you want something,
yeah.
they're very agreeable out of the gate. They're like, yes, of course, that's a great idea. And it's only when it backs itself into a corner where it's like it's not working and you say, wait a second, this is not working. Give me other alternatives here. Then it's like, oh yeah, this was a bad idea all along. We should have gone this other path.
And then locking in on, cliches and tropes and all of that stuff. It's just a lot of vanilla, and like learning how to use LLMs to get past that vanilla. That's when you sort of start seeing some of the creative stuff you can do with it, right? So
Well, here's a really interesting question about AI and design, which is, design is a fundamentally a creative enterprise. You're trying to, this is where the innovations happen in technology too, don't get me wrong, but like it's a creation, you're creating something. And AI is based on the probability of what's happened in the past, right? And so, like, I guess the question of whether an AI can come up with something truly novel is it can come up with something truly novel in the code space, but it might not compile, right? Because right. But the question is, can AI actually come up with truly novel designs, uh, given that it's all referential to what it's been trained on?
yeah, and that's the thing, that the results that I've seen, it's not like, I haven't seen like craft. I've seen like sort of an amalgamation of the deductive whatever it is that spits out, and it's like, eh, there it is. It works. That's exciting. It works, but like really figuring out a way to draw craft out of that, I don't know that it can do that, because our jobs are sort of to bring out the human factor and whatever you're looking at or whatever you're using.
Hmm.
Uh,
So so what is your okay? So very much related to this question of like it's just kind of regurgitating stuff, and that true craft, true innovation, kind of has to have uh, can't just be regurgitation of something else. Um, how do you feel about sort of like everybody draw myself as a Peanuts character, draw myself as a Studio Ghibli character, right? Like it's clearly like copying well understood, well intellectual property. What's your take on that? I mean, how do we contend with that? And I feel like in the space of visual design, it's like so apparent
yeah,
when it's copying existing intellectual property.
yeah. The implications of that is like it it's sort of mind-boggling, and I don't know how to even talk about it. I mean, I love generating images with Midjourney and seeing what I get. It's really interesting, some of the things it spits out. I mean, some of the posts that I've done, Brad, um, are all created with Midjourney. Um, but if you look through Midjourney today, a lot of it's just eh. The beauty of it is like really pushing the LLM to create something that you've never seen before, or something that feels a little organic.
I feel like maybe this is a little bit of a provocative statement on my part, but when people complain to me that the LLMs are essentially copying something that it saw, I make the point that like, well, that's how all artists work, right? All
Right.
artists trained themselves on consuming art from other artists.
Yeah, we're standing on the shoulder of giants, like that same holds true to music and art and whatever any art form that you're in. So,
There was a pretty big court ruling in the United States about that. I won't remember every detail of it, but basically, and of course, it's going to get appealed. But some, I guess, maybe it was some sort of publisher or something was, suing an AI model maker, maybe OpenAI, I have no idea who, over, using their content. And the judge said, well, no, I mean, authors read other people's books and they have those ideas in mind when they write their books. So if the AI is generating something new, the fact that they've read your book isn't isn't IP theft. Um, Now, if they're copying your book work, that's different. But it was fairly interesting. I think what was interesting about the ruling was that the judge was looking at the AI as though it was an original content creator and saying, well, original content creators take inspiration all the time.
so there's so much gray area there. Like, what is it? Didn't New York Times just sign a licensing deal with one of the LLMs?
Right.
And I'm like, really? They did that? And in my mind, I thought somebody like the New York Times just would not do that. So yeah.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting too, because that might have just been purely a business decision from the perspective of, well, they're going to get our content one way or the other, so we might as well get some money for it.
yeah, why not?
I do think it's interesting, Vince, and at the risk of like becoming a little too philosophical, um, I I appreciate that you as a visual creative artist, right? And your point is like this is true for music as well, right? Or storytelling. Like, yeah, we as artists, even if we're creating original content, we can't help but be inspired by everything that we consumed up to date. And I have always felt that that seems like a genuine comparison to what the LLMs are doing, you know? And so it's interesting, Scott. This court ruling essentially is validating that concept. And to hear you, an artist, which I feel like I think of you, Vince, as an artist that is creating original work all the time. And for you to essentially say the same thing, it does kind of validate my perspective on that a little bit. So thank you for making me feel validated.
No, I mean, we tap into and get inspired by things, like it's every single project that I've ever done that has some meat on it. The first the first step in the process has always been to go out and look at the competition and just look at examples, and you get inspired by that.
The mood board, basically.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and I love that part of the exercise because you it really gets the creative juices flowing. You get excited about what you're looking at, and you discover new things, and leverage some of those ideas. Don't outright steal them. You can't do that. You don't want to do that. It doesn't make the work rewarding. You want to springboard off of some of these ideas that you're seeing,
Right.
right?
Right, and those things is what I can't I remember many times you and I've been in a room either working on a project together or working on somebody else's project together, and it's like they're going to bring scraps of paper of like, oh, I saw this
Yeah.
picture in Sports Illustrated and it had this feeling, it made me feel a certain way, right? And
Mhm.
for you that's like that's the essence of trying to draw out from your client, like, what are you really trying to get to here? And if they bring in a bunch of things that inspired them, it's all part of the zeitgeist, right? It's all
Yeah,
part of the cosmic unconsciousness. We're all in this together.
Hmm. And that's just one more
absolutely.
argument that we're all in the simulation, Brad.
Maybe, maybe. Um, so, Vince, like, you do use Midjourney, and you're cranking stuff out with it, and you're pushing it in certain ways, and yet you sort of feel like it's all vanilla, right? Or is it all vanilla? Is that the takeaway? Is this kind of like help us draw this in? Like we're seeing, we constantly hear this in the software development side of things. It's like, yeah, you can, junior engineers, you can get if you know what you're asking for as a designer, as a leader, as the person asking the question, you can get it to do junior quality work for you. Is that true in visual design as well?
Well, I mean, the visual stuff, like the stuff I get with Midjourney, it's essentially a picture. It's not product oriented. Like the other thing that it just cannot do yet is like you get a you get something that you like, you get a result that you sort of halfway like at a mid journey, and then you reprompt it and tell it to tweak this thing and do it this way and do it this way and do it this way. The results usually spiral downward, not upward. Like you sort of you have to treat it like an art director and with sort of a wide cast a wide net or a wide stroke, like broad strokes, better word. So, and you have to be willing to just accept it or just move on and try a different approach on your prompt. Like, so the stuff that you're seeing, the mid-journey stuff that you're seeing, like in my LinkedIn posts, those are just random things that I've come up with, random prompts that I've come up with, loosely related on the thing I'm posting. So, and I treat it with broad strokes.
Yeah, like you can't ask it to go edit. Once you have it, don't ask it to change it because it'll just come up with something completely different.
And don't get really specific because the minute you start getting specific, it's not going to give you what you want. It's just not. So, some of the imagery is really, really, really cool. Some of the imagery is really, really cool. So, there's no denying that. But you sort of have
but it's very hit or miss, basically.
Yeah.
So Scott, I'm going to nerd out for a second. So Codex, ChatGPT Codex, which is one of the agent programming things. You can basically like, it's similar to, and GitHub just recently, a couple weeks ago, released this Copilot will take tickets. So you can like basically write up a ticket and give it to these things. So Codex just recently added where when you give it the ticket, you describe what you want it to do. There's a drop down between 1x and 4x where you can just say, give me 4 different implementations of this, and it literally will go off and rerun the exact same ticket request 4 completely independent times, and then you get back 4 completely different implementations on your task, right? And again, you're left with like adjudicating like which of these 4 is more like what I wanted, right? And I just now, for the first time, thought, oh, that's kind of like this mid-journey thing, right? Like you ask it for something, and you could get back like 4 completely different variations that it came up with on the same exact prompt. And God forbid you like one of them, but just a little bit different, because you're never gonna get it. You're never gonna get it to come back with just a little different.
That is a funny thing. You can never get the AIs to come back with the same thing twice.
That's essentially, yeah, that's it.
Which is a puzzler, because sometimes you want it to come back with the same thing twice.
Yeah.
Basically, like do that exact same thing you did, but just make this small adjustment to it. And it can't do that. At least I haven't been able to get it to do that very well.
It struggles at that for sure.
Don't change a single pixel except for these few pixels right here. And it
have you
impatient.
What happens? What happens in the space of like in when you're this is Scott and I are speaking from the perspective of like code, which feels a little bit more deterministic. Like it ought to be able to do it in the code space. Like literally, don't change more than 2 lines of code here, buddy.
Yeah.
You know? But in the visual space, it's got to just be even crazier, just like completely unhinged.
It's just way more of a crapshoot. And the code part, I totally get what you're talking about too, because I can't remember the last thing I was working on, but maybe it was that MCP thing. I had this incredibly long conversation with Gemini, and what I found is, and this has happened before that more than once, is it will re-break what you've already fixed multiple times. You'll keep going, and you're better off just starting over. Like when it starts to break things, just start over with. But it's interesting how it undoes what it's already fixed. So
we've heard that before, and I would love, at least in like the coding space, and it might make sense in the design space as well. I tried to do this recently with ChatGPT, the ability to give it a checkpoint. Like, okay, cool. This is checkpoint number 1. I'm going to go more, and I want to be able to say, okay, you know what? Roll back to checkpoint number 1. We've messed this up, because you have to go start over, and then because doesn't do the same thing twice, it's hard to get back to that spot where it was good, and you still wanted to do more. I guess you pull the code and you commit it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and Cursor starting to have some things like, oh, roll back to the previous thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's like integration with GitHub too, so you could submit it at incrementally as you're fixing things, so it doesn't.
Yeah, I just want to be able to tell the AI as I'm talking to it, like, okay, cool, this is a check, and just remember this
Remember this.
spot so you can go back to here.
Vince, I'm kind of curious. One of the things that we have when we've talked to other folks that are really into the sort of using AI generated code from a software development perspective, we often compare it to these like junior engineers, and we kind of talk often about. And I know that at least with my team, I'm really coaching them around like, treat this thing as something that you've got to supervise, you've got to manage it, you've got to like validate what it's doing for you. It's don't ever just like let it run on its own. Um, do you feel like, I mean, obviously these are early days, but do you feel like the same kind of like guidance and oversight that you have to give the AI, is that similar to the type of guidance and oversight you had to give junior designers who worked for you, or is there an analogy there? I'm sort of like it just being very green and novice, and that you as the senior person is just managing it. Is there a parallel there, or less so with the
Well,
design pieces of it?
using it for explicitly for design, I just haven't really done it yet. Like outside of, and even then, it's not really design; it's a prototype. But I can't think of an example where I used it explicitly to output a design. Um, I remember at one point in this exercise with this course that I took, an exercise, all I wanted to do was create an image of the ideal laptop stand, right? And all it was is like a typical stand. I wanted like an aluminum thing, and I wanted paper trays below it. I wanted to be able to adjust it, just a laptop with two paper trays below it. And I spent so much time trying to just get it to do this. And again, it was an imagery, and it would redo and undo and redo and undo. And then I tried other LLMs. In fact, I used a product called Flora-Fauna, and it's a really cool product, but it's essentially a storyboarding product. So you can see all the iterations, and you actually have all of your prompts below each storyboard. You can also change the LLM that you're using to see what the results you're going to get. And everything was so random. Like it, I guess what I'm getting at, Brad, is no, it like when you talk to a human, a junior designer, you mentor them and sort of guide them in the right direction, which I was trying to do, but it just didn't work. So
It's not right.
yeah,
They're not coachable yet.
no.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Like, so what's your take? Is it coming? Is it going to get there eventually? I mean, you've been paying attention to this for the last couple years. Does the trajectory feel like it's speeding up? Does it, or do you feel like there's just still these really big hurdles or roadblocks that you don't see it approaching?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. And like, I don't know there's some weirdness around it, because if you have a daily LLM that you use and it actually gets to know you and learns from that and sort of gives you answers based on everything else that it's learned from you, clearly that's begins to be coaching, right? So and I don't know if there's an LLM that explicitly does that. Does ChatGTP kind of do that? I don't know. Or Claude, I'm not sure, but like as soon as they start sort of tracking and learning from you, it seems like it could be coached.
Yeah, it's getting there. Well, this was super fun, Vince. Thanks for taking the time to come talk to us. I love watching your journey on how you're pushing LLMs and AI mid journey. No pun intended. I love your journey with mid journey, um, and I appreciate that you brought this insight about kind of how it affects how AI affects design and how important design is to great product. So thanks for taking the time
Thanks.
to chat
Thanks.
with us today.
I appreciate it. I appreciate being on board. A lot of fun.
All right. Thank you.
I love
Awesome.
talking about this stuff.
This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at How Many CTOs Pod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at howmanyctospod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.